The call came on December 30th, 2019. Frank Lucas, dying in a New Jersey nursing home, had one final secret to tell. Not to family, not to lawyers, to a journalist he'd never met. "I need to tell you about Bumpy's money," he whispered through the oxygen mask. "The real location, before I go. But first, let me take you back 51 years. July 7th, 1968. Harlem Hospital. Room 412. The king of Harlem is dying, and he knows it. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, the man who controlled every number, every bag, every corner from 110th Street to the Bronx, is flat on his back with tubes in his chest and 1 foot in the grave. The heart monitor beeps like a countdown clock. Every pulse weaker than the last. Standing at the foot of the bed is Frank Lucas, 38 years old. Country suit. Sharp eyes, empty pockets. The apprentice watching his mentor slip away. Bumpy's voice is gravel and whiskey. "Frank, you listening?" Frank nods. When a dying king speaks, you shut your mouth and open your ears. "I got something for you," Bumpy rasps, "but it comes with a price." The price? Silence. Because what Bumpy Johnson is about to reveal isn't just money, it's $7,200,000 in 1968 cash. That's $61,800,000 in today's money. $61 million that never touched a bank, never paid a tax, never left a paper trail. Hidden, invisible, untouchable. "The Italians think they run this city," Bumpy whispers, pulling Frank closer with trembling fingers. "When I'm gone, they're going to come for everything. My corners, my connections, my throne." The heart monitor speeds up. Time is running out. "But there's one thing they'll never find," Bumpy continues. "Because they don't understand the first rule of being a king." "What's that?" Frank asks. Bumpy's eyes lock onto his. The money's safe where nobody with money would ever look. At 11:47 p.m., Bumpy Johnson flatlines. Frank Lucas walks out of that hospital room with nothing in his pockets but everything in his head. A riddle, a location, and a choice that will define the next decade of American crime. The loud man buys a Cadillac. The silent man buys the supply chain. Frank chose silence. He chose the throne. And for 51 years, he kept Bumpy's secret. Until December 30th, 2019, when Frank Lucas, 3 days before his own death, finally revealed the exact location where Bumpy Johnson hid his empire's fortune. But here's what makes this legendary. Bumpy didn't just hide money. He hid a test of loyalty that only one man could pass. Stay with me, because to understand where Bumpy's millions went, you need to understand 3 things: hunger, silence, and the price of being chosen. If you want to see how a dying king's riddle built an empire that even the mafia couldn't touch, hit subscribe right now, because this story is about to get very, very dark. Harlem, 1965. Cold wind, hot streets. Cadillacs crawling slow like sharks on 125th Street. Neon buzzing. Sirens in the distance, the city breathing heavy with the weight of secrets, and the smell of ambition burning itself alive. In the middle of all that noise, there's a man nobody sees. Frank Lucas. Not the king, not the plug, not the man in the mink. Just a driver. A ghost from North Carolina with calloused hands and a country accent, running errands for small-time hustlers who wouldn't trust him with anything more valuable than a grocery run. He's been invisible for 3 years. Watching the flashy dealers like Red Dillard cruise past in brand-new Cadillacs, gold chains catching the streetlight, drawing attention like moths to a flame that will eventually burn them alive. Frank watches them and learns the most important lesson of his life. The loud man dies first. The geometry of silence. That's what separates the kings from the corpses. In the jungle, camouflage is more important than claws. Visibility is a death sentence. So Frank keeps his head down. Drives when told to drive. Picks up packages when told to pick them up. never asks questions, never volunteers information. In a neighborhood where everyone has an opinion and a story to tell, Frank Lucas becomes a ghost. Then comes the raid on the number spot on 127th Street. One rainy Thursday afternoon, Frank is parked outside a brownstone where the numbers runners make their collections. Same spot every week. Same time. Same routine. Then the routine breaks. Unmarked cars screech up, doors slam, heavy boots on concrete, federal jackets flood the building, the air changes, you can smell fear. A hand yanks Frank's door open, out of the car. Now. He doesn't run, he doesn't argue. He steps out slow, hands up, eyes down. He's invisible, but today invisible isn't enough. Today he's in the wrong building at the wrong hour and the feds need a body. Basement room. Bare bulb. Metal chair bolted to the floor. Wet concrete. The kind of place where names disappear. An agent leans in close. Brooklyn accent. Coffee breath. Who you run for? Frank looks straight ahead, says nothing. 6 hours. 6 hours of questions, 6 hours of promises, 6 hours of threats. They beat him. Not the Hollywood kind where they slap you around and threaten your family. The real kind. Ribs. Kidneys. The kind that makes you taste copper and see stars. They want names, they want addresses. They want him to tell them who runs the operation. Frank says nothing. Not a word. Not a name. Not even to beg them to stop. He takes every blow in silence, staring at the wall, counting the cracks in the plaster. By hour 6, they realize they're wasting their time. They throw him out on the street with 2 cracked ribs and a warning. Word travels fast in Harlem. By the next morning, everyone knows Frank Lucas took a federal beating and didn't say a word. Most people think he's stupid. One man thinks he's valuable. Bumpy Johnson calls Frank to Wells' restaurant for a private meeting. Frank arrives at noon, wearing his only clean shirt, trying not to wince from the pain in his ribs. Bumpy is already seated in the back corner booth, a cup of coffee steaming in front of him, his eyes calculating and cold. He doesn't shake Frank's hand. Doesn't smile. He slides a cup of coffee across the table and says 6 words that will change everything. I'm going to tell you 3 secrets. Frank's hand freezes halfway to the coffee cup. Bumpy leans forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. If any of them reach the street, you're dead. If you keep them, you'll be rich. The first secret is a name. Judge Harold Rothman, Federal District Court. On Bumpy's payroll for 7 years, taking envelopes to make cases disappear. The second secret is a location, a mafia drug warehouse in the Bronx, hidden inside a legitimate olive oil business. The third secret is a number. $47,000. The exact amount Bumpy pays the NIPT every single month. 3 secrets, 3 bullets that could kill Bumpy Johnson if they ever reached the wrong ears. And he just handed them to a nobody driver from North Carolina. Frank keeps the secrets. For 8 months he says nothing. Bumpy watches him during those 8 months. Tests him again with smaller secrets, dangerous information, each test more dangerous than the last. Frank passes every single one. Not because he's brilliant, because he's loyal. Bumpy begins teaching Frank the real game. Violence is a tax on business, Bumpy explains one afternoon. It's expensive and loud. The loud man dies. The silent man becomes legend. Then comes the day that changes everything, March 1966. Bumpy tells Frank to meet him at an address on 139th Street, a rundown tenement in one of Harlem's poorest blocks. Bumpy is waiting outside, holding a heavy duffel bag. 4th floor, green door, 2 mismatched locks. Remember this address, Bumpy says. One day, if you don't get yourself killed, you'll understand why it matters. Frank watches Bumpy climb those stairs alone, The duffel bag pulling his shoulder down with its weight. He never sees what's inside that apartment. But he memorizes every detail. The address, the green door, the silence of the street. Because when a dying king shows you where he keeps his secrets, you pay attention. Your life might depend on it. July 7th, 1968. Wells Restaurant, Sunday afternoon in the Kingdom. The smell of fried chicken and collard greens hangs thick in the air. Jazz trumpet bleeds from the corner jukebox, mixing with the clink of silverware and the low murmur of Harlem voices. Bumpy Johnson sits at his usual table, back to the wall, face to the door. A king never sits with his blind side exposed. He's laughing at something, fork halfway to his mouth, looking like a man who owns time itself. 3 tables away, Frank Lucas eats in silence, always watching, always learning. The geometry of silence made flesh. Then, everything changes. Bumpy's face shifts, the laughter dies. His left hand shoots to his chest like he's trying to catch something falling inside. The fork clatters against the plate. His eyes go wide with something Frank has never seen in them before. Not fear. Surprise. The surprise of a king who thought he had more time to prepare his succession. Bumpy Johnson collapses forward. The plate shatters. Collard greens scatter across the table. Someone screams. A waitress drops a tray. The whole restaurant freezes for one impossible second, then erupts into chaos. Frank doesn't move. He watches the paramedics rush in 11 minutes later. Watches them work over a body that's already gone. Watches them load the King of Harlem onto a stretcher. Chest still, mouth open like he's trying to swallow one last breath of his empire. The trumpet keeps playing, an invisible soundtrack to the fall of a throne. Frank pays his check. Exact change. No rush. No drama. He steps outside into the Harlem afternoon and watches the news spread like wildfire. Corner to corner. Block to block. The king is dead. The throne is empty. And nature abhors a vacuum. Within 2 hours, the vultures start their feast. Mickey Barnes moves first. Of course he does. The loud man always sprints when kings fall. By nightfall, he's throwing a party at his apartment on 8th Avenue, music loud enough to shake windows. Champagne flowing like blood. He stands on his balcony in a custom fur coat, announcing to the street below that Harlem needs a new king. Mr. Untouchable. The chosen one. Frank watches from across the street and remembers Bumpy's lessons. The loud man dies. The silent man becomes legend. Mickey Barnes just signed his own death warrant in mink and diamonds. While Barnes celebrates, the real predators move in shadows. The Italian 5 families send their representatives uptown before the body is cold. Men in expensive suits, with Brooklyn accents and dead eyes. They come to pay respects, but everyone knows the truth. They're mapping territory, calculating which operations they'll absorb, which corners they'll claim. The Italians see opportunity where a king used to breathe. The nip kicks down doors within 24 hours. 4 locations. Number spots. Stash houses. They're not looking for arrests. They're hunting for Bumpy's legendary fortune. The millions everyone believes he hid somewhere in Harlem's forgotten corners. They tear apart apartments, rip up floorboards, check walls for hidden safes. They find nothing. Everyone is grabbing. Everyone is reaching for pieces of a dead king's empire. Everyone except Frank. He does something different. Something nobody else thinks to do. He visits Bumpy's widow. Mame Johnson's apartment on Lenox Avenue is heavy with silence. No music. No visitors. Just the muffled sound of a television turned low in another room. She sits in her living room wearing black, back straight, grief trying to bend her but pride keeping her standing. Frank removes his hat at the door, steps inside slow, respectful, like entering a church. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Johnson," he says, voice low. "He was everything to this neighborhood. He was my husband," she replies. Harlem came second. She studies him with sharp eyes despite the tears. After an hour of quiet conversation about Bumpy's wisdom, his lessons, his way of seeing 5 moves ahead when others were still figuring out the first, Mame stands and walks to a small desk near the window. She opens the top drawer and pulls out a sealed envelope. "All these men been coming through here," she says, holding the envelope between 2 fingers. "Bringing flowers, bringing promises, asking about money. You know what none of them asked?" Frank waits. "They didn't ask if Ellsworth left any final instructions. You're the only one who asked about him instead of asking about his treasure." Frank takes the envelope, doesn't open it in front of her, thanks her. Promises to honor Bumpy's memory. Then he leaves the apartment and steps back into the chaos of a kingdom trying to balance itself without a king. Later, alone in his room, he opens the envelope. 3 things inside: a warning written in Bumpy's jagged handwriting, "Trust no one." A location, 139th Street. 4th floor, green door, and a key taped to the paper. Old brass worn smooth by years of use, warm now in Frank's palm. Frank reads the note twice, then strikes a match and burns it over the sink, watches the paper curl and blacken until Bumpy's final words become ash and memory. The address is already burned into his mind, has been since 1966, when Bumpy first showed him that building. That night, Frank walks alone to 139th Street. No crew, no backup, no gun. Just the key in his pocket and a dead king's riddle in his head. The building looks worse than he remembered. Boarded windows, crumbling steps, graffiti covering the walls like scars. The smell of decay, spilled beer, and broken dreams hangs in the air like fog. Perfect camouflage for a king's treasure. Nobody with money would ever step foot in a place like this. Frank climbs the stairs slowly. Each step creaks under his weight. Each creak echoes like a warning. Somewhere a baby cries. Somewhere else, a television plays too loud. The sounds of survival in a forgotten corner of the empire. 4th floor. The green door waits exactly where he remembered it. Same peeling paint. Same 2 mismatched locks. Frank pulls out the brass key. His hand is steady. No fear, no hesitation. The key slides into the lock like it was born there. He starts to turn it. Then he hears them, footsteps on the stairs below. Heavy boots. Multiple pairs. Coming fast. The sound of men who aren't here to pay respects. Someone followed him. Frank's hand freezes on the key, the lock half turned. He's trapped on the 4th floor with nowhere to run, no fire escape, no back exit. Just him and whoever is climbing those stairs with purpose and bad intentions. The footsteps reach the landing. Frank holds his breath and wonders if Bumpy's final gift is millions in cash or a bullet with his name carved into the brass. The silent man lives. The loud man dies. Tonight, Frank Lucas discovers which one he really is. The footsteps reach the 4th floor landing. Frank's hand freezes on the half-turned key, every muscle coiled tight, ready to fight or die in this forgotten hallway. The geometry of silence shatters. Time moves like cold honey. A voice cuts through the darkness. Old, gravelly, amused. "Easy, young blood. You jump any higher, you're gonna fall through this rotted floor." Frank spins around, fists ready, and sees him. Junie Bard. 70 years old if he's a day. Thin as a wire coat hanger, hat tilted at an angle that went out of style when Eisenhower was president. Eyes sharp enough to cut glass, skin like old leather left in the sun too long. Bumpy's oldest friend. The man who ran numbers when running numbers meant something more than collecting pocket change. "What you doing here, Junie?" Frank asks, Voice steady despite his hammering heart. "Same thing you doing, I expect," Junie says, climbing the last few steps with the careful movements of a man who's earned every one of his 70 years. Listening to a dead man's final words. Junie stops 3 feet away, hands visible, showing he's not a threat. "Bumpy told me you'd come tonight. Told me to make sure you came alone. Said if anybody else showed up with you, I was to send you back down these stairs head first." Even in death, Bumpy Johnson is testing Frank's loyalty. Even from the grave, he's checking to see who deserves the throne and who deserves a bullet. "Well," Junie says, nodding at the green door, "you gonna open it, or we gonna stand here giving the rats something to gossip about?" Frank turns the key all the way. The lock clicks heavy and solid, expensive mechanism on a cheap door. The door swings open on hinges that scream like they haven't moved in years. The smell hits them first. Mildew. Rotting wood. Decades of poverty soaked into cheap plaster and peeling paint. The apartment is exactly what you'd expect in a building like this. A slum. Water stains map continents across the ceiling. Wallpaper peels like dead skin. Floorboards sag under their weight, groaning with each step. One bare bulb hangs from a frayed cord, throwing weak yellow light across a room that looks like hope came here to die. No one with money would ever step foot in a place like this, which is exactly why Bumpy Johnson chose it. Junie walks to the far wall, where the wallpaper hangs loose in one corner. He peels it back, revealing faint lines marked in the old plaster. He raps his knuckles along the wall in a pattern, 3 quick taps, then 2, then 3 again. Hollow sound, then solid, then hollow. He finds what he's looking for and pulls a small crowbar from behind the radiator. Bumpy planned for everything. Together, they pry open a section of wall that swings inward like a door. Behind it, the air is cooler, still preserved. Junie flips a hidden switch. A small bulb buzzes to life. Frank stops breathing. It's not a bank safe. It's a tomb built from money. Floor to ceiling, vacuum-sealed packages of $100 bills stacked in perfect columns. Green bricks wrapped tight in plastic, stretching from wall to wall like a fortress built from forgotten dreams and invisible power. "Last count, we made it about 1.2, Junie whispers, running his hand along the stacks with something approaching reverence. $1 million. Enough to buy a small army or finance a revolution. 1,200,000. But in the center of the room sits something more valuable than money. A small metal table holding a cassette recorder and a handwritten note for Frank. "Play alone." Junie sees the note and tips his hat. "This is where I leave you, young blood. My job was getting you here breathing and alone. Whatever happens next, that's between you and the ghost." Frank is alone with a dead king's voice. He presses play. The tape hisses, then Bumpy's voice fills the room, rough, tired. The sound of a man recording his final orders. "Frank, if you're hearing this, I'm gone. And if you're hearing this alone, it means you kept your mouth shut when it mattered." A pause. The sound of a lighter clicking, smoke being exhaled. "This money ain't for spending, Frank. It's for building. The Italians think they own Harlem because they control the supply. They buy from the Corsicans, cut it 5 times, sell us poison at premium prices. I'm tired of scraps." Bumpy's voice gets stronger, more focused, like he's leaning through time itself to make sure Frank understands. "You're going to use this seed money to do what I never could. Go straight to the source, Southeast Asia. The Golden Triangle. Buy pure heroin at the source, ship it back in military coffins. Nobody questions those boxes. They just salute and cry. Build a pipeline that makes the Italian connection obsolete." The tape crackles. When Bumpy's voice returns, it's barely a whisper. "But listen closely. This only works if you stay invisible. If you get loud like Nicky Barnes, you'll die like a rat in a cage." The loud man buys a Cadillac. The silent man buys the supply chain. If you stay silent, you'll become what I never could, a legend the system can't catch. One final pause. Someone will betray you, Frank. Someone close. When they do, remember this moment. Remember why I chose you. Not because you're the smartest or the toughest. Because you know when to shut your mouth and listen. The tape clicks off. Frank stands surrounded by a million reasons to become a god or a ghost. He doesn't touch a single dollar. He memorizes everything. The smell, the layout, the exact count of packages. Then he seals the wall, straightens the peeling wallpaper, and locks the green door. He walks out with empty pockets but a full mind. 3 blocks later, he spots the black sedan in a shop window reflection. Lights off. Engine humming. Following his exact pace. Someone knows about the vault. The hunt has begun. The black sedan kept its distance for 3 blocks, then vanished into Harlem's maze of shadows and secrets. Frank Lucas never looked back. He was already thinking 5 moves ahead, just like Bumpy taught him. The hunt had begun, but Frank held the advantage of invisibility. Bumpy's $1,200,000 became seed money for something the world had never seen. Frank didn't buy Cadillacs or throw parties. He bought plane tickets. Bangkok first, then deeper into the Golden Triangle, where poppies grew thick as secrets and heroin flowed purer than anything the Corsicans sold to the Italian mafia. He moved like a businessman, not a gangster. Cheap suits, no jewelry, never loud. He sat with farmers and warlords, talking numbers and kilos, negotiating directly with the source. The product was revelation. 98% pure heroin that cost him $4,300 per kilo at the source. The same product cost the mafia $50,000 after passing through Marseille and a dozen dirty hands. Frank was about to cut out every middleman between Southeast Asia and the streets of Harlem. Then came the genius that made him legend. The cadaver connection. Vietnam War casualties coming home in flag-draped coffins, sacred and untouchable. Nobody questions those shipments. Customs agents salute and families cry, while pure heroin travels invisible in false bottoms and secret compartments, hidden under the cover of American grief. Every coffin that landed at JFK was a silent middle finger to the Italian monopoly. Blue magic hit Harlem like a revolution. Bright blue stamps on every bag, twice as strong as anything the mafia sold, half the price. Junkies knew math better than accountants when survival was at stake. Within 2 years, Frank controlled the heroin trade completely, making $1 million every single week. But here's where Frank separated himself from every other kingpin in history. He stayed invisible. Conservative suits, modest car, quiet house in New Jersey. To neighbors, he was a successful businessman. To the streets, he was a ghost. His operation was so compartmentalized that the dealer selling bags on 116th Street had no idea who supplied the product. Money flowed through Bumpy's network of forgotten stash houses, apartments in buildings so poor even rats moved out. Cash went in dirty, came out clean, and nobody saw anything. The Italians felt their empire crumbling, but couldn't identify the source. Their profits collapsed, corners emptied, customers disappeared. They sent investigators uptown, tortured dealers, bribed cops. All they hit was a wall of silence because you cannot betray what you cannot see. Meanwhile, Nicky Barnes exploded across Manhattan like a firework with a death wish. Magazine covers calling him Mr. Untouchable. Custom fur coats worth more than houses. Penthouse parties where champagne flowed and cameras flashed. He was everything Bumpy warned against. Loud, flashy, doomed. Frank watched Nicky's rise with disgust, knowing the ending before it was written. The loud man always dies. It's just a matter of time. For years, Frank stayed perfect, invisible. The system was blind to the man quietly pulling in $1 million weekly. Then Frank made the most expensive mistake of his life. his mother's birthday party. He wanted to honor her, show her that her son from North Carolina had made something of himself. So he bought a chinchilla coat, custom-made, floor-length, $50,000 worth of fur and pride and stupidity. Worse, he wore it to the Muhammad Ali fight at Madison Square Garden. Ringside seats, cameras everywhere, flashbulbs popping like small explosions. Under the lights, the coat glowed. For the first time in his life, Frank Lucas was loud. The next morning, Detective Richie Roberts saw the photo over his morning coffee. The one honest cop in New York, staring at a black man in a better coat than Italian dons, sitting ringside like royalty. Roberts asked the question that would destroy everything Frank built. Who is that? The investigation began. Federal task force, wiretaps spreading like cancer, surveillance teams hunting the source of the purest heroin flooding Harlem streets. But they were also hunting for something else. The mythical millions everyone believed Frank inherited from Bumpy Johnson. Then they raided 139th Street. 30 agents at dawn, battering rams against the green door, tearing the building apart, looking for Bumpy's legendary vault. They found the hidden room, the vacuum seal marks where money used to be stacked. But they also found something that made Frank's blood run cold when his lawyer told him. Fresh cigarette butts. Recent newspapers. Evidence that someone else had been using the location. Someone who knew about the vault, knew all of Bumpy's secrets. Someone close. Someone who'd been waiting for the right moment to make their move. Bumpy's voice echoed from beyond the grave. Someone will betray you. Someone close. The question wasn't if anymore. It was who, and by the time Frank figured it out, it might already be too late. December 30th, 2019. Cedar Grove, New Jersey. Not a corner office. Not a penthouse. Not a throne room where kings make their final speeches. A nursing home. White walls stained yellow by fluorescent lights that hum like dying insects. The smell of disinfectant fighting a losing war against the odor of boiled vegetables and human decay. Machines beeping in steady rhythm, counting down seconds that once moved like lightning through Harlem's veins. This is where legends come to fade into background noise. In room 214, Frank Lucas lies hooked to machines that breathe for him when his lungs forget how. 79 years old. The hands that once counted millions now shake, reaching for a plastic cup of water. The eyes that stared down Italian dons are cloudy with cataracts and morphine. The empire is gone. The blue magic is history. His brothers are dead or locked in cages where time moves backward. The streets that once whispered his name in fear now barely remember he existed. But Frank has one final secret burning in his chest. The one he kept for 51 years. The one that will change everything you think you know about Bumpy Johnson's missing millions. A young journalist sits beside the bed, recorder running, notebook balanced on his knee. He grew up on the legend, not the man. On movies and magazine articles and street mythology. He's been trying to get this interview for 3 years. Frank kept refusing until this morning when he called and said simply, "Come now, before the ghosts take it with me." Frank motions him closer. The oxygen mask hisses with each labored breath. When he speaks, his voice is gravel and whiskey and the weight of 5 decades. "Everyone thinks Bumpy left me millions in that vault," Frank whispers, each word costing him energy he doesn't have to spare. "They think I walked into 139th Street and found a pot of gold like some fairy tale. Truth is, he left me something more valuable than money." The journalist's pen freezes. This isn't the story he came for. He left me a lesson about the difference between being rich and being legendary. Frank's eyes close, but his voice continues, pulling memories from the darkness like fishing for ghosts. That $1,200,000 in the vault? That was just the test, the entrance exam. The real fortune was never in one location. Bumpy was too smart for that. Too paranoid. Too wise. He pauses, gathering strength like a man collecting coins from couch cushions. The $7,200,000 everyone talks about? It was spread like seeds across Harlem. Dozens of stash houses. Apartments in buildings so poor, so forgotten by the city that even the police wouldn't waste their time kicking down doors. We're talking about places where the elevators never worked, where the heat got shut off every winter, where hope moved out and never paid the security deposit. Frank coughs, chest rattling like dice in a cup. The journalist waits, afraid to interrupt the flow of confession. The money's safe where nobody with money would ever look. That was Bumpy's genius. He stuffed cash in walls where rats paid rent, under floorboards in projects where junkies slept in hallways, behind radiators in buildings scheduled for demolition. Rich people don't set foot in those places. Poor people don't know what they're standing on. Over the years, Frank went back. Carefully. Quietly. Like a surgeon, not a robber. One apartment every few months. Never rushing, never making noise. Sometimes there was treasure. Sometimes there was just rot. Some of it went bad, Frank admits, voice getting weaker. Water damage. Mold. Rats chewed through walls and made nests out of $100 bills. I walked into one spot and found green mush that used to be money. Can't spend that at the corner store. Some vanished in other ways. Random drug busts where cops stumbled onto locations by accident, never knowing they'd found pieces of a dead king's fortune. Junkies tearing apart abandoned apartments for copper wire. Discovering bundles of cash and spending $1 million on $10 fixes, dying with fortunes under their mattresses. But I found enough, Frank says, a ghost of the old fire flickering in his cloudy eyes. Enough to finance the cadaver connection. Enough to build blue magic into something the Italians couldn't see coming. Enough to honor Bumpy's memory by proving they didn't own Harlem's throne. Then comes the revelation that changes everything. In 1991, when I got out of prison, I went back to Harlem one last time, Frank whispers, breathing becoming more labored. 23 years later. Old man with a cane instead of a gun. I remembered every location Bumpy showed me before he died. Most were demolished, turned into parking lots or condos for people who never knew they were building on buried treasure. He shifts on the pillow, every movement costing him. But 3 buildings were still standing. Leaning. Rotting. Forgotten. I went inside with a crowbar and found what remained of Bumpy's original stash. Nearly $800,000 in preserved bills, vacuum sealed and hidden so well that even time couldn't destroy them completely. The journalist leans forward, pen ready. What did you do with it? Frank's lips curl into something resembling a smile beneath the oxygen mask. I could have run with it, could have disappeared to some beach somewhere. Started over as a rich old man with a mysterious past. His voice drops to barely audible. But you get older, you start hearing different parts of the story. Not the drugs, not the violence, not the money, the respect, the legacy. What you leave behind when the machines stop beeping. Frank stares at the ceiling, seeing something the journalist can't. Bumpy always wanted something he never got to build. A place in Harlem that didn't have his name on a police file. Something clean. A youth center where kids could go and not end up like us. He used to talk about it late at night when the streets got quiet. Books instead of bets, he'd say. Courts instead of corners. The machines beep faster, sensing the end approaching like a storm on the horizon. So I took that. 800,000, Frank says slowly, each word deliberate. I washed it, broke it into pieces so small nobody could track it. And I donated it. Anonymously. No plaque with my name. No statue. No Frank Lucas Memorial anything. Harlem Youth Center. Brick and glass rising where one of Bumpy's old spots used to sit. Basketball courts where kids shoot hoops instead of heroin. Classrooms where they learn math instead of counting drug money. Computers instead of corner calculations. All of it built with the ghost of a dead king's fortune. Bumpy didn't leave me money, Frank says, his breathing becoming shallow, the heart monitor beeping in irregular rhythm. He left me a choice: keep the throne and die defending it, or honor the king and become something more than a gangster. Silence settles over the room like dust on abandoned furniture. I chose honor. Took me 23 years in a federal cage to understand the lesson, but I finally got it. The journalist asks the question hanging in the air. Do you regret it? Any of it? Frank is quiet for a long time. When he speaks again, his voice is barely a whisper. I regret the chinchilla coat. That's what got me caught. Pride, vanity, the need to be seen after years of being invisible. Bumpy warned me. The loud man dies. I got loud for one night at Madison Square Garden and lost everything I'd built in silence. He closes his eyes, gathering strength for his final words. The real treasure wasn't the millions hidden in Harlem's walls. It was learning the difference between being rich and being legendary. Rich men count money until they die. Legendary men change the game forever. Frank Lucas dies 3 days later, January 2nd, 2020. The newspapers run small obituaries calling him a drug dealer who inspired a movie. They mention the chinchilla coat and the federal conviction, but miss the real story entirely. They never understood what Bumpy Johnson taught Frank Lucas in that hospital room in 1968. That power isn't about money or territory or respect. It's about the choice you make when nobody's watching. Keep the throne or honor the king. Die rich or become legend. Frank chose legend. It cost him everything and gave him immortality. The youth center still stands in Harlem today. Kids still play under lights paid for with invisible money. They don't know they're shooting baskets on a court built from a dead king's fortune. They don't need to know. The legend is in the building, not the name on the wall. So here's the question Bumpy left for all of us. The riddle that echoes through decades of choices and consequences. If you found a dead king's fortune hidden in the walls of forgotten buildings, would you keep the money and claim the throne, or give it away and become the legend? What's the real price of being chosen? And when you're lying in a nursing home with morphine in your veins and death waiting in the doorway, which choice lets you die in peace? The silent man lives. The loud man dies. But the legendary man never dies at all. He just becomes a story people tell in whispers, wondering if any of it was real. Hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more stories from the shadows. Because the history books lie. But we tell the truth about the price of power and the cost of becoming legend.